Hello, this is Matt on the Moon Lambo channel. Here we go again, folks. Look at this headline from CoinDesk. Of all places from CoinDesk, this is actually a good article. Check this out. And the reason I say that, of course, most of you are well aware, CoinDesk has spent like a decade, the same as Cointelegraph, just crapping all over XRP. So to see this, it's a little surprising, but it's actually correct. I've seen multiple sources talking about this, actually, and it does mean XRP is about to go again in all likelihood. Anyway, the headline here, XRP price coiled for a significant move as key volatility indicator mirrors 2024 patterns. And I'll just tell you here at the outset, they're talking about Bollinger Bands. But before going further, I do want to be clear, I do not have a financial background of any kind. I am not offering financial advice, and you definitely should not buy or sell anything because of anything I say or write. I'm just an enthusiast who enjoys making YouTube videos about crypto-related topics, but just as a hobby and just for fun. All right, here's a post from Charting Guy. This is actually from April 16th of last year, 2024, and I was very excited to share this with you at the time. I shared this exact post in April of last year, and a few other times I've referenced it since then, actually. And here's what he was talking about. This is highly significant, which is why this ties in perfectly with what's happening in this CoinDesk article. Anyway, the post from last year reads as follows. XRP monthly Bollinger Bands are now the tightest they've ever been in history. 0.7 for the width. The tightest it got before this was 0.73 in 2017, 1 month before, and then he's got the little rocket ship emoji, and then he sarcastically writes, probably nothing. Oh, it was something, folks. Look at how tight the Bollinger Bands got here in 2017, and then what followed that? Massive burst in price to the upside. What happened when they got tight again? This is last cycle of 2020, 2021. Well, yeah, it's true that you didn't hit a new record in tightness last cycle, but they did get tight, and then when they burst, rocketed in price to the upside. And that's despite the SEC lawsuit. It still went from, the bottom for the cycle for XRP was, March in 2020, it got down to like 10 cents. And then it did a 20-fold increase about a year later, all the way up to $2. I mean, think about that. XRP did a 20-fold increase while it was under attack from the United States government via the SEC, and it still did a 20-fold increase from the top to the bottom of the cycle. Like, I gotta say, that's impressive. So anyway, as of April of last year, tightest in history. And you know what it did? It spent roughly the next half year getting even tighter. And so I kept insisting. I was like, look, I don't know when this is going to burst, folks. Could be any day you just wake up and it's going. But I said, when it goes, it's going to result in XRP rocketing in price because we're in a bull market. And so when it breaks, it's going to be to the upside. That was my bet. Because that's just common sense. I'm not a chart guy, but you do not have to be to understand this very simple concept. And it is true that when Bollinger Bands get tight, the indicator itself doesn't tell you whether the break will be to the upside or the downside, but it does tell you when it goes, it's going to go. And if the tighter it gets, the bigger it's going to go. And so this is a real metric that really does work. And once you got to that point where it finally exploded, you could see that breadth open up on this chart. And so that's why it's exciting to see them, multiple chart analysts, as I'll point out in this video, talking about this right now. So the headline here, again, XRP price coiled for a significant move as key volatility indicator mirrors 2024 patterns. The price action for XRP and Bitcoin resembles a tightly compressed spring on the verge of uncoiling with a sudden release of energy. That's the message from a key volatility indicator called Bollinger Bands. Or Bollinger Bandwidth is what they wrote here. Anyway, Bollinger Bands are volatility bands set at +2 and -2 standard deviations above and below the 20-period moving average, SMA, of an asset's market price. The bandwidth measures the space between these bands as a percentage of the 20-day moving average. In the case of XRP, the Bollinger Bandwidth has narrowed to its lowest level since October 2024 on the 4-hour chart, where each candle represents price action for a 4-hour period. The 4-hour chart interval is quite popular in the 24/7 crypto market, allowing traders to analyze and predict short-term price movements. Bitcoin's 4-hour chart mirrors the Bollinger Band width pattern in XRP. The long-held belief is that a tighter Bollinger Band width, reflecting a quiet period in the market, is akin to a compressed spring ready for significant movement. Folks, that's why, I know, we spent a long time in 2024 with XRP basically moving sideways in price. A long-ass time, did we not? but it was worth it. Because when it went, oh my God, it went. But it's not done. This next phase will result in price discovery. That's what I'm convinced of. And we've been waiting for that. It's been over 7 years since XRP has entered actual price discovery. So it's exciting. Yeah, we already got vindicated because it hit a new all-time high, but we've got to see that price discovery happen and melt faces, and I do believe it's coming. Anyway, piece continues. During these calm phases, the market accumulates energy that is eventually released once a clear direction is established, often leading to dramatic rallies or sharp price declines. Both XRP and Bitcoin surged in November and December following an extended range-bound period that left their bandwidth at levels comparable to those observed today. That said, tighter Bollinger Bands do not always indicate a bullish volatility explosion. They can also foreshadow a sell-off. For example, the bands tightened in October 2022, signaling significant move ahead, which materialized on the downside after FTX went bust. Yeah, and that's what I was saying a few minutes ago. It's not a guarantee that the movement, when it goes, it's going to go up. It's not a guarantee, but look at the environment that we're in. That's why I said it with such confidence last year. When it goes, it's not going to be to the downside. It's to the upside. XRP's got legal clarity. So many reasons. Well, same situation here. When this thing goes, it's going to go big. I don't think you're going to see some massive breakdown to like 49 cents again. That just seems completely absurd to me. This thing's going to go and finally into price discovery. And there's so much confluence with other things happening in the market that I've been talking about a lot in recent days. It just makes sense that the Bollinger Bands are tightening, with the backdrop being what it is on a macro scale. There's another analyst here that agreed. I'm not sure. I'm not familiar with this analyst. I'm not even going to try pronouncing this, the name. But here's the headline from You Today. Next big XRP move, Bollinger Bands suggest these two scenarios. And it's functionally the same type of argument, so I'm not going to waste time running through that. But I'm just letting you know that there are multiple analysts that have recognized this and are like, yeah, this thing's going to go. Here's yet another analyst. This is chart analyst Ali Martinez. And yesterday he wrote, the Bollinger Bands are squeezing on the XRP 4-hour chart, signaling that a major price move could be just around the corner. See, tons of analysts noticing this. He also shared this post, and this is from this afternoon, actually. XRP appears to be forming an inverse head and shoulders pattern, signaling a potential bullish breakout towards $2.70. Now, I got to tell you, I was actually kind of surprised to see that from him, because in recent days, he's actually, so I got a little bone to pick here, he's actually one of the few analysts, and there aren't many that were arguing this, but he's one of the few analysts that was warning there could be a notable drop closer to the $1 range for XRP. Like, he was arguing that there was a reasonable chance it could happen, and so is Peter Brandt. But Peter Brandt suffers from XRP derangement syndrome. Ali Martinez does not. He just really thought that this was a head and shoulders. And tons of analysts that I follow looked at this like, that's not a head and shoulders. And they made various arguments having to do with this part where I'm moving the mouse right here. Like, that invalidates the structure. I've seen many analysts argue that. And they also said that it had already gone on too long to be a head and shoulders. But still, I'm not afraid to share negative sounding views. And I would give him credit if he was right, but it doesn't look like that's the case anyway. So he's now flipped. So he no longer seems to think we're going down to like $1.29. He thinks it's an inverse head and shoulders move to the upside of $2.70 sooner than later, which I find fascinating. I also got another bone to pick with them. He shared this post, and I don't think I mentioned this in a video yet. If I did, and you've already heard this, my apologies. But I wanted to make sure I shared this on the channel. So this is a couple days ago, and he said the XRP network has been shrinking over the past month. Newly created addresses have dropped from 5,200 to just 2,900. That's literally not true. The data being displayed here, yeah, that's accurate. But what he stated is not true. He said the XRP network is shrinking. No, it's growing. I responded. I simply wrote, that's growth, not shrinking. And then somebody responded here, Cassius Maximus said, the growth is shrinking. And that's true, but that's not what Ali Martinez said. And so anyway, I responded to Cassius here, who made a perfectly fine point. But I wanted to expand my thoughts on this for anybody that might have been curious here. And I wrote, depends on the time frame you analyze. For example, daily new account creation on the XRP ledger is still about 3 to 4 times what it was before the election. That's pretty substantial growth. And so I'll pause to note here, for most of 2024, before the breakout, on any given day, and it could be higher or lower than this, but usually about 1,000 new accounts were created per day. So even now, we're still, depending on what day you're talking about, 3 to 4 times above that. That's massive. And it's pretty damn consistent despite this lull in the market. where we've just been basically moving sideways. And so I wrote, that's pretty substantial growth. And then I said, also the growth spurts tend to mirror general excitement in the market. So it's not the case that there is something fundamentally wrong with XRP just because more new accounts are being created in December and January. And folks, that's definitely true. This syncs up with what's happening in the market, which is to say not much this second. We've been moving sideways for like a couple months basically at this point. Not going to stay like that though. Well, this bad bitch going to move soon. that's certainly my belief. I'm not a financial advisor. You should not buy or sell anything because of anything I say or write. That would be a very, very, very bad idea. Until next time, to the moon, Lambo.